that social interaction is massive, massive. It makes such a difference as well. So we're social creatures and we're meant to be socially engaged. So when we're in isolation, that's when you get your depression and everything else, and your dopamine receptors aren't getting hit. So go for a walk outdoors, 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't cost anything.
Welcome to the ADHD Families Podcast. I'm your host, Sharon Collin, an award-winning credentialed ADHD coach and consultant, and mama and wife to a very ADHD family. I am seriously obsessed with making life easier for people with ADHD and those that support them. My business, The Functional Family, provides life-changing support and strategies for ADHD. I particularly love anything that saves time, decreases conflict, and creates space for fun. Do you want a life with your beautiful family that is more functional, fun, and full of joy? Let's explore together the wonderful and sometimes wacky world of family life with ADHD in the mix. Welcome to another episode of the ADHD Families Podcast. I am so happy that you are here today. I have an incredible guest expert coming to talk to us about functional neurology and supporting our beautiful kids' brains. Her name is Gen Dharamaraj, and she is the owner of Nurturing Brain Potential. She is a pediatric chiro and studied in functional neurology. And she is going to help equip us with some of the practical tools to support our kids and their beautiful brains' potential, their developing brains. It's a really interesting chat, this one. We go through why some kids with ADHD and autism have delays, or perhaps they haven't moved past certain developmental milestones, and how we can support them. We also chat about her beautiful book, Ollie the Octopus and His Magnificent Brain, and we look at some very easy things that we can incorporate into our day to support our beautiful kids. And remember, there's neuroplasticity, there's hope for our gorgeous kids, and also those primitive reflexes. All of this happening in this chat. Let's get to it. Thank you for being here today, Jen. I'm so excited for our chat.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and privilege to be on this show, and I'm so excited that you've got me to come in and join and help clear some of the mystery surrounding ADHD.
Oh, yes. Now, I've got so many questions brimming around in my head, but before we get started, tell us a little bit about what you do and why you do it.
Okay, so I started off as a pediatric chiropractor, and I did my master's in kids with learning issues. And I found chiropractic helped to a certain degree, but it wasn't the answer. So when Dr. Robert Melillo, author, researcher, clinician, came out from New York to speak to us at a pediatric conference, it was an aha moment. It was like, oh my gosh, this is the missing link. But to be honest, I just completed my master's and I didn't want to study. I'm not an academic. So it took a lot for me to go, no, this is where I need to head. So set me off on a journey, and 3 years where I went to shadow Dr. Rob Melillo in Bulgaria. We saw the most severe autistic kids. I took my study. I went to Barcelona a couple of times and Amsterdam. And when I shadowed Dr. Robert, I was like, this is it. So I studied I did my fellowship in functional neurology. So it's about looking at developmental neurology. So looking at bottom up as opposed to top down, because most other places look at top down, but we look at developmental neurology. And what we do is we look for areas in the brain that haven't quite developed. So say someone with ADHD, it's about attention, but the attention mainly lies in the right hemisphere. So it tells me there are gaps in development. Now, the right hemisphere is also responsible for inhibition. So it's stopping behaviors or realizing that those behaviors might not be socially accepted. If you're not aware, you can't stop it. So this sent me off on a journey, and I opened up Nurturing Brain Potential in Brisbane 4 years ago. So in that time, we have helped 27 nonverbal clients speak. So that's my forte. Wow. So yeah, so that's actually my niche. And I've just recently published a case study on one of my kids that had conversations within 4 weeks. Now the parents are told that this child will probably never speak and will be intellectually disabled. Now this kid is amazing. He's speaks nonstop. And he's in going to grade 1, and he's doing amazing. Like, he's learning wise, he's a bright little spark. But what we needed to do is find out, why isn't he developing like he should? And that's what we do with every single child that comes in. We sit down and we work out, okay, what is it that's stopping them from achieving? What is it that's creating these behaviors? And what can we do about it? The beauty is the brain's neuroplastic. So majority of these cases, like particularly ADHD, it's all based on symptoms. It's all based on what's going on. There is no MRI that goes, oh, that child's got ADHD, or QEEGs that goes, we can see there's a lack of communication in the right prefrontal cortex and the right hemisphere, particularly ADHD, but there's nothing that says there's brain damage. So Dr. Robert Melillo says is that if there's no damage, if we stimulate the brain, we can get it firing again. So there's no ceiling to hope. And that's what my forte is to making sure that each child that comes in is, we check, no matter what they've got, whatever diagnosis, is having a look and saying, okay, what is going on in the brain? How can we stimulate the brain? How can the parents help do these exercises at home to help the stimulation, to get new networks growing? So there's no ceiling.
Okay, this is so fascinating to me. And tell me how people would present to you and how you would go through that process of working out how you can help them.
Okay, so when they first come into our clinic, most of the time, like, I see a lot of autistic kids, and because I understand the neurology, most of the time they're dialing in fight flight. So that's part of the neurology. And what happens is, if they don't have their ventral vagal system, their ability to self-regulate, self-soothe, and self-calm is not there. And we find, as we go through the program, that we do a 12-week program, that the next time they come in to see me, they're self-regulating, self-soothing, and self-calming a lot better. So I was saying to one of my clients the other day, I'm saying, like, the first time we came, I couldn't do half of my exam because this kid was kicking, screaming, running around the room, checking everything. Like, it was really hard to do a proper exam, but I got the information that I need, which was retain reflexes and also the state of the vagal system. The thing that we got to realize is that if these kids are dialing in fight flight, they're scared. The main thing as human beings we want is safety. So we're looking for safety. Now, with the kids, if they're developmentally haven't got to the stage where it's visual cognition, where they can look around and go, oh, I feel safe. So, Sharon, when you and I go to a party, we look around the room and we go, oh, I don't really like that person. And then, you get that person that you go, oh, I don't really want to be in their company. So we survey the room visually. We check and we go, okay, I'll avoid that person. I won't see that person and I'll stay back. So that's how we ascertain like safety. But if a child comes in and they're stuck in that motor sensory input where the brain needs that sensory and motor stimulation to find out if they're safe. So they run around the room touching and playing with stuff and pulling things apart and pulling my pot plant and breaking my pot plant because to them, visually, they're not there. So they're looking at motor and sensory input. So they're touching things, they're finding things, they're looking to see, is it safe? And so at school, you're expected by the time you're 5 to have that visual cognition. If you don't, and you're still looking at motor and sensory input all the time, it's so hard to sit still. How can I sit still and look at letters when visually I'm not there? Developmentally, I am not there. Developmentally, I still need to touch and play and move and do things to get my brain firing. So you see how the school system doesn't quite help that child and they don't fit in. And it's not because of behavior. It's because neurologically, they're not there. They're not ready for school. You know what I mean? So the kids that come in, in our center, we've had our TV smashed. We've had holes in the wall. I've been bitten by a 7-year-old. So all sorts of different things. But if you understand, they're not trying to be naughty or they're not trying to annoy their parents. The fact is, neurologically, they cannot self-regulate, self-soothe, and self-calm, because developmentally, they haven't achieved those milestones. So it's so important to look at these milestones and go, okay, where are they at? What can I do as a practitioner to get them to the stage where they can do really well? The first client that I got from nonverbal to verbal, I think she's the reason I drink gin, to be honest. When she came in for 45 minutes, so when we're doing intensives, we're doing primitive reflexes with lasers, and for 45 minutes, her grandma had to hold her down. She was kicking, biting, screaming for 45 minutes because she's nonverbal. She's dialing in fight, flight, and she couldn't calm herself down. So we just did what we did. And within 4 weeks, she started her first sentence. And now she comes in, she sings, she sits, she's doing incredibly well, because those areas of her brain that weren't developed, we used stimulation and we got them developed. So she could get to the stage where she could dial in her self-regulating system. So she could calm herself down. She didn't have to kick, bite, and scream anymore. So that was massive. And she's doing incredibly well. And yet again, this is another kid they were told that would never speak. So it's incredible what potential there is out there. And it's amazing if you understand the neurology and you understand the neurology of ADHD or autism or OCD, then you know that those things can be helped by stimulation of the brain.
And I love this approach too, because I think that sometimes we get stuck, and I see this with adults with ADHD too. They get limiting beliefs about their ADHD. They think they can't grow. And I often hear it around habits. Like they go, oh no, I can't I can't establish new habits, or I can't establish new routines, or I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. These kind of limiting beliefs. But I keep saying to them, like, there is neuroplasticity. Like, we are always growing. We are always learning. We are always changing. But what you're doing and your clinic is just helping it along. You're targeting that in a kind of purposeful way. So tell me, what are some of the things that you would get your clients to do?
Okay, so when they come in, we do a complete assessment and we go, okay, this is the area of the brain that's not firing well. And then we generally get them to do primitive reflexes at home. But say their vestibular system hasn't developed. Like if you spin a child, they should get dizzy. If they don't get dizzy, it means that vestibular system is not firing. So then we get them to go home and spin in the chair, whether it's right or left. Then we look at their eyes. Are they able to track to the right? Are they able to track to the left? And then we give them homework to do that. So if their eyes aren't tracking to the right, then when they go to read, they can't focus on the words. So it's not, you know what I mean? It makes it an uphill battle for them. So we find out what parts of their brain isn't firing and we stimulate them. So say Dr. Rob Malillo looks at the hemispheric approach. So looking at right brain and left brain. So as human beings, we've got both sides of the brain doing different things, which means that we can do complex things. So, but if the right brain hasn't developed, then things that are easy for others is not easy for us. So say socially, it's very hard to engage socially. I know my husband's a left brainer, so he's an accountant. He doesn't like small talk. He doesn't like meeting new people. He works for himself, but he has to catch the 10 to 7 bus every morning. He likes routine. He doesn't like stepping out of routine. But as a right brainer, I get bored. I'm like, oh, I want to work different hours because, I'm bored with the same hours and same things. So I always look for new things. So that's my right brain. But you imagine a child that comes in, and if their right brain hasn't fired so well and they are still in parallel play. So, with your kids, when they grew up at age 2, they like 18 months to 2, they were still playing by themselves. They weren't aware of other people. They were happy in their own sphere because they're used to playing on their own. For that interactive play, that's development. So once you start to notice other people and you go, oh, there's other people around and I would like to connect. So that's the right brain, and that's your social part of the brain. But a lot of the kids that I see are stuck in parallel play. So they don't play with other kids. Socially, they don't know how to interact. They don't understand. The right side of the brain is actually your ability to read social cues. So they don't understand. And a lot of the kids come up and they're too close. They don't get personal space. because they can't read those social cues, because their brain can't perceive that that person doesn't want them hugging them or on. They just don't read those social cues. And we see adults like that as well. So they'll go and they just have no idea that you're upset, or they can't read, or empathy is not great, because that's a right brain, social, like the part of the right brain that does those things. So when you have a brain that's really not balanced, or one side is so extreme, the things that the right side of the brain does, it's so much harder to do those things. So we expect them at school to have a balanced brain. We expect them to be able to socially play with others. And if they don't, then we go, oh, well, behavioral, there's something wrong with them. But the thing is, that part of the brain hasn't developed. They might be still stuck in parallel play. What a lot of my clients are saying is that the things they notice is when the kids start therapy, they're like, oh, wow, they're playing with their brothers and sisters. They've never done that before at age 8 or 9 or whatever it is. They're starting to actually realize that they've got, oh, there's people around me. I've got, and they start to read social cues. And that's all part with development with the polyvagal theory. So we see so much out there now about vagal, and polyvagal, which is amazing. So the other thing that I want to give parents on this podcast is the thing that you can do with your kids that's really easy is to get a pulse ox that you can buy in the chemist, or to read the heart rate and oxygen saturation. And what you do with your kids, you put the pulse ox on both sides, so the right finger and the left finger, and you have a look at the heart rate. Google the normal heart rate of that child and see what your child's doing. The kids that I see, if they're dialing in fight flight, their heart rate's going to be high. So that tells me that the vagal system, the ability to self-soothe, self-regulated, hasn't come into play.
And how would it be different on both sides?
So with some kids, I see a difference of 20 or 30 beats per minute.
On each side?
On each side, yes, because you're looking, the way the vagal system develops is ipsilaterally. So the right side of the brain controls the right side and right hand, left side and left hand. So we do that constantly in our center, and we go, okay, so if we know that right side of the brain and they're dialing in like 120 beats per minute and the left side's 89, then what we do is we start to do more vagal stimulation on the right side. And the way you can do that is that our ears are highly innervated by the vagal nerve. So what we do is vibration on that part of the ear, or ear massage on that side. I mean, we've got tools, so we've got lasers and other things, but for parents at home, buy these pulse ox from the chemist or online or Amazon, and then check both hands. So check your right hand and your left hand, and then you write down their heart rate. Massage their ear for about 5-10 minutes, get them to hum, to sing, and then vibration on the belly is another good one, or heat on the belly, because the vagal nerve supplies the belly. Just doing these simple things can calm down your heart rate. So by doing that, that can help with self-regulation, self-soothing, and self-calming. And it's something inexpensive that you can do at home.
That's really interesting, because I know about the humming. I don't know how I know that, but I knew that humming was good for the vagus nerve. And I was getting the kids to hum in the car. Like I would do some like a thing and I'd get them to copy it in the hum. Now that we are hearing a lot about the vagus nerve, can you tell people what the vagus nerve does and what it's responsible for in the body?
Absolutely. So when we look, Stephen Podges developed a theory about the polyvagal system. So when I went to uni, I learned about the sympathetic system, your fight flight, and your parasympathetic nervous system. So I thought it was a balance, you're either fight flight or parasympathetic nervous system. It's not that easy. So when we're developing, the first thing that developed is our dorsal vagal system. So that's our freeze. That's our fight flight. That's our completely freeze, our fear paralysis reflex. So we go into deer in the headlights or play dead, possums play dead. That's the one. So some of the kids that come in, they're dialing that. That should have gone by the time of birth, because while we're in the womb, the next reflex that develops is your sympathetic nervous system. So that's your fight flight, and that develops in the womb, and that basically is the moral reflex. So when we come out, we're mainly dialing in fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system. So for that, we don't sleep very well. We have to eat lots because our tummy hasn't developed like it should. Between 12 to 18 months, there's something called the ventral vagal system that develops. And what Stephen Podges says is that's to do with social engagement. So as a baby looking for safety starts to look at mum or the caregiver to see, are they happy? So then they look at facial expressions. They look, is she smiling? Oh, is she angry? So they start to read social cues. And that's how the ventral vagal system descends, because that social cue gives them a feeling of safety. Now, 90% of the kids that I see don't have the ventral vagal system. So they're dialing in fight flight. They're not able to self-regulate or self-soothe, and they've missed that social engagement. They've completely missed that part of, oh, mum's safe, I'm okay, because they can't read expressions. The other thing that's important is that it's what we're seeing today is, unfortunately, that face-heart connection doesn't happen as much if mum's on the phone, or I'm not saying anything about that, but that's such an important part of development. And then to go through COVID where we're not seeing expression on the face, or another thing that we can tell about how much vagal is developed is by facial expressions. So, there's people with the deadpan and you talk to them and you're like, oh, are they happy or not? So imagine as a child and their parent hasn't got the vagal system developed and they're trying to learn social emotion, but there's no expression on their face, makes it very, very hard. So the ventral vagal system develops after birth, and it has to do with that connection with the caregiver.
This is so fascinating to me. So I wanted to ask, like, when I don't think it's just the kids that have a dysregulated nervous system that are listening to this podcast, right? Because I would say that the parents do as well, myself included. What are some really simple things that we can do to help? You did mention humming before. You talked about the ear massage and things like that to just sort of down regulate our vagus, help calm the vagus nerve.
So as parents, this is really hard. So we find vibration on the belly works a lot. And the other thing is getting out into nature. Nature is phenomenal for like the beach, or even going out for a little walk is massive in helping to regulate. So with a busy, just make sure that you get 5-15 minutes at least outside. And the other way that can really help regulate your system is watching sunrises and sunsets, because that has a massive impact on melatonin production, and that can calm the system down as well. Most parents aren't sleeping, they're wired, but if you start watching sunrises and sunset, that will make a massive difference in helping to regulate your system.
Oh, I love that. I mean, they're quite nice things to do, right? Like getting out in nature, watching sunrise and sunset, that's lovely. And you don't have to go somewhere to do it. You could probably just sit on your balcony and watch a sunrise and sunset.
Absolutely. And I think it's trying to find those ways and putting it into your daily life, which is hard. I understand, you're running around, you've got so many things to do, but just wake up 5-10, wake up for sunrise. Just, you don't have to go to the beach or walk, just in your backyard. You know what I mean? And that's massive. And so we say with a lot of kids as well is that get your kids out. Watch sunrise, make it a family thing, or sunset, however your household works, whether you're early risers or late rise. But just doing something like that can really make a massive difference with regulating your nervous system. And I think we need to stop thinking about all those, oh yes, I don't have time for a massage, or I don't have time for this, but it's just it's to incorporate it in your daily life, is to make it easy and simple. And I think that's the crux of it, is once you start doing that, then it makes it so much easier to incorporate it in daily life. Because often we put it as a big elephant. It's like, oh, I don't have time for that. I've got to do this. I've got to do school drop off. I've got to get dinner on the table. They've got homework. I understand. I get that. But it's just taking even 15 minutes out of your day and go, hey kids, let's go for a walk at sunset. Let's get your bikes, get outside, get outdoor in nature. Movement is so, so important. And I think, we spend too much time sitting around and indoors, and we're missing out on sunlight. And sunlight is like, it's free. And we live in a beautiful country. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's just make the most of it. You don't have to go to the park. Just have a picnic in the backyard. Just get a towel, stick it down. Okay, we're watching sunset in our backyard. Don't have to go anywhere. Do a little picnic and make it a fun thing with your family, but outdoors and in sunlight. And that's massive. It makes such a difference.
I love that. And, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was talking to my husband about this, who has, a quite severe end of ADHD on the spectrum. And he says that he always, even though he hates the idea of getting up early, right? He hates the idea of it. He still has to get up earlier for work. And he finds that those days that he gets up early, and probably because he's watching the sunrise, he feels so much better. He feels so much better for the day. So it obviously has a nice impact on his nervous system.
Absolutely, because vitamin D has correlated with dopamine receptors. So dopamine makes us feel happy, right? So the more sunlight we get, the happier we are. And so we look at it like it gives us a good and exercise in the morning. Like, even if you don't want to, like, that makes a massive difference as well. Like, you find, like, I know with my son, I've got a teenager, so I remember picking up at school, I'm so grumpy, oh my gosh. And then, I take him to the gym, I drop him off. And then when I pick him up, it's like picking up a different kid. He's talking to me. It's like, oh my gosh, like it's incredible. The turnaround, that 180 flip, is because he's gone to the gym. And the same with my husband. My husband works in an office, is an accountant, and he's taken up trail running. And I tell you, Sharon, he's been the happiest he's been, because he's outdoors, he's doing things that is nature, he's stimulating his right brain without really knowing it. Like, I don't tell him these things because, but being outside, he's happier when he goes for a run, because he's getting a dopamine hit, he's out in nature, and sunlight was stimulating all those dopamine receptors. So it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, just a walk. As I said, we're very, very lucky in Australia. You know what I mean? It doesn't cost anything to go out for a walk in your neighborhood. And it's that social interaction as well. That social interaction is massive, massive. It makes such a difference as well. So we're social creatures, and we're meant to be socially engaged. So when we're in isolation, that's when you get your depression and everything else, and your dopamine receptors aren't getting hit. So go for a walk outdoors, 10, 15 minutes. Doesn't cost anything.
Now, I wanted to ask you, because, I'm lucky enough to have this platform of a podcast that I get to talk to all you incredible people. When we were talking about before about, those real sensory seeking behaviors, and you talked about like the climbing and like misreading those social cues, for a lot of our community, we have, they sort of they're sensory seeking in the way of sibling fighting, right? Mm-hmm. So it starts off okay. They're just sitting next to each other. Perhaps they're playing a game, and then one has to touch the other one. And then they're like, it's almost like they are seeking like sensory input from wrestling and fighting. And it all starts off like just nice, but it ends up bad pretty quickly. Do you have any strategies that we can, because it's something that gets talked about a lot in our community, for that sensory seeking kind of fighting behavior that goes on? Asking for a friend.
Of course. So we have a tool that we call the Resimax, which is it's developed for vibration and frequency. So we find that's amazing. So because they're looking for the sensory and motor input, let's give it to them. So with the Resimax, with all my families, it's basically they do lots and lots of vibration therapy on the kids. So then you're actually stimulating it, and you're giving in that sensory and motor touch that they don't need with the wrestling. So as I said, the Resimax is what most like vibration is phenomenal. So then if you just get a massager or as I said, and just vibrate that area of their the whole system, and that will make a massive difference as well. Like, it's just vibration, getting that So finding other ways that they can get that sensory motor input, like outside, doing an obstacle course, skipping, trampoline jumping, anything to give them that sensory, so they don't need their siblings to provide that, because so yeah, just I know you're asking for a friend, but yeah. But just getting vibration. So vibration is an incredible tool for sensory motor input. With the kids that I see, a lot of them have what we call the rooting reflex. So they're constantly seeking things and putting it in their mouth. And because their ventral vagal system hasn't developed, the suck swallow is still an important way as a baby that you self-soothe. So they're still stuck in that stage of self-soothing and putting everything in their mouth, or the kids that I see are eating these shirts, biting, chewing. One kid I had was chewing on his sister on her arm, you know what I mean? So that sensory input. So we say, well, if the brain's asking for it, let's do it. So then we do exercises with the rooting reflex where we use the Resimax and we do cat whiskers on the cheeks. And then with the Resimax, we do lots of vibration on the tongue. And that stimulates the brainstem. So with the Resimax, you just vibrate on the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. That actually wakes up the brainstem. So if they're sensory seeking and sucking on shirts and things like that, vibration on the tongue. Like, you don't have to use the Resimax because it could be expensive, but just get a vibrating toothbrush.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, so you can use vibration, vibrate lots of facial vibration, because when we look at the neurology of the facial area, the trigeminal nerve, which is the cranial nerve, that stimulates the whole brainstem. So what we do in our center is that we use TENS pads on the face, and that stimulates the whole brainstem. So if you got an inexpensive TENS machine, TENS pads on the face, because that wakes up the trigeminal nerve. And if you look at the anatomy of the trigeminal nerve, it's the whole brainstem. It's the longest nuclei. And if you look at what the brainstem, that's where our primitive reflexes is. But more importantly, in the medulla, in the bottom part of the brainstem, is the vagal centers. So we want them stimulated. So if you put in our center, we do TENS pads on the face. So that's like a $1 billion tip.
I love this.
But if you just get TENS pads, just a little bit, not too hard, but you don't want it to contract. So you just want sensation. So just a little light sensation on their face. And we say that we do that while you're doing primitive reflex exercises. And that will stimulate the whole brainstem. But if you've got a child that's sensory seeking, vibrate via electric toothbrush on their tongue, on their face, then you're giving the brain what it needs to move to the next stage.
You're really saying, like, give the brain what it needs. Like, that's what it is. If it's calling out for something, we find a way to easily incorporate that to stimulate that area.
I think because you got to realize with development, when we're developing from being a baby, we're seeking so much sensory motor input. Like, as a mum, I did the same. Like, I put my child in that little crate thing, because we haven't cooked dinner and stuff like that. But they need to be moving, exploring, doing lots and lots of these sensory motor things. Like, they need to be, I should have let him crawl all over the place. I mean, we did other stuff, but I think, those, like the motor part of development is so important. And I think quite often we miss it. Like in school, like you're meant to sit down when you should be running around. So as a parent, it's, if you are aware that the motor input is so important, get your kids moving. Just get them moving. Like, crawling. If they haven't crawled right, they didn't crawl very long, get them back to crawling. I get my mums having the kids on the football and doing cross crawl, because if they didn't crawl very long, it means that part of the brain, crossing the midline, is difficult for that child. So we go back to crawling. I mean, I know there's lots of different therapies out there that go back to the beginning. Let's start crawling. Let's doing brain gym. Let's get movement going. And that's so important. So I think as parents, I think we need to look at that and go, that's a very important part of brain development. So the more we get them moving, the better it is. So, get your child in sports. Let's get them off the screens and doing stuff. And you don't have to, I get all my parents, like, I go, let's get a ninja course. How about we get those pool noodles, like cheap pool noodles from the $2 shop, tape it up, and you've got a balance beam. whack it in the ground, make them go on the balance beam, get a ball while they're standing on it, throw the ball at them so they're getting the vestibular system to go. Do obstacle courses in your house. If you've got a busy life and you've got to get dinner on, get an obstacle course, get them out there, go, okay, let's time it. Let's do it. Let's do a little mini obstacle course. How fast can you do this today? And then tomorrow, and then with your siblings. Let's challenge. Kids love challenges. So, like when you get a kid and you go, oh, I bet you can't get on my couch. And they're on my couch in 2 seconds. I bet you can't do that. You know what I mean? So using that as incentive. And then, getting like they feel so, when they achieve things, they feel so proud. So it's a dopamine hit. So you do a little balance obstacle course in your backyard. Get some hoops, make them jump through the hoops. There's so many things out there that we don't have to spend a lot of money on, but it's about challenging getting that motor sensory input into the brain, because that will make cognition much, much better. So when we look at it with Malillo method, we look at it developmentally up. So we looked at primitive reflexes first of all. They should have gone by 12 months. Are they still retained? Then we look at sensory motor input. Then we look at cognition. And then we look at instruction. The trouble with schools, they go to instructions. So if someone's not doing, they go to that top of the brain, but you got to realize that child hasn't got there yet. So telling a child to sit still makes no sense. Or telling a child that's struggling with reading, let's do more reading. But why is that child not reading in the first place? You know what I mean? Like, it's going back and going, where in development has there been like little glitches? I call them glitches in the brain. Where are the glitches in that brain? If that child can't focus, and when we do tests and the eyes aren't coming in together like it should, then how are they supposed to read if they can't focus? With the kids that I see, like when we read something, we read the cat sat on the mat. These kids are seeing cat and mat, and the brain's trying to work it out. And it's a processing issue. It's not an intelligence issue. There are a lot of kids that I come in super, super intelligent. But until we get the system firing up and we get a bit more balance in their brain, in society, they're not seen as that.
Oh, so tell me, thank you so much for sharing such incredible information today. If you were to leave our beautiful listeners with a couple of key takeaways or things that they could try, what would those be?
I think the vagal system is massive. So the 3 things that I would do, I would get them check for retained primitive reflexes. So someone like OTs or whatever it is, but someone who can check them and make sure those reflexes are integrated. I would get them to check by pulse ox and check the heart rate, right side, left side. Yeah, and then I would start doing some vagal stimulation. So heat on the belly. So with some of my kids who are anxious and going to school, I get mum to put a heat pack on their belly, get them to hum on their way to school. And so by the time they get to school, their nervous system has calmed down. And then 3, let's do get out sunrise, sunset.
Oh, thank you so much. They are nice, easy, practical things that we can do to support our beautiful kids. Now, if people are wanting to find you, Jen, where can they find you?
Okay, so I put a lot of my stories on my Insta page. So it's Nurturing Brain Potential, my Insta page for that one.
Now, I would love for you to share a little bit about your book as well.
Okay, so with the kids that are coming in my center, I have this amazing mural octopus on the corner, and one of my kids named it Ollie. Oh, yeah, Ollie the Ollie. And so what I was thinking is that with these kids, I wanted to explain to them that the brain's neuroplastic, and I did it in a way with the different animals. So Ollie the octopus, he has issues. Stormy the starfish has meltdowns. So what I wanted to show the kids is these retained reflexes doesn't have to be there all the time. So one of my kids that came in, she's like 11, very defiant, didn't want to do any of the therapy. So mum gave her the book, Ollie the Octopus, and she read about Daisy, the dyslexic dolphin, because kids know that dolphins are intelligent, but Daisy, the dyslexic dolphin, can't read. And so she jokes around in school. She tries to take away from the fact that she can't read. But when she started doing the Malillo method and stimulating the brain, reading improved. So when this girl read it, it gave us so much hope. So the idea behind the book is to show these kids that if you do those exercises, that there is neuroplasticity, which means that the brain can improve. The other thing with that is in the back of the book, we have exercises for primitive reflexes. So if you know your child's got a certain retained reflex, do the exercises.
I love this. So I will put a link to the book as well in the show notes for today, so people can, have a read and start doing some of those exercises. It's set out in such a nice, clear way that I think our audience will appreciate. Thank you so much for our chat today, Jen. I've loved chatting with you.
You're very welcome. And the book's available on Amazon, Booktopia. So if you just Google Ollie the Octopus and his magnificent brain, you can buy it in lots of different places.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the ADHD Families Podcast. If you loved it, please share it on your socials. I want this to start a conversation about ADHD. If you want to make this mum do a little happy dance, please leave a review on iTunes. If you would like to know more about what we do, check out thefunctionalfamily.com. I truly hope that you enjoyed this podcast and you use it to create a wonderful, effective, joyful life with your beautiful children.